To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell is generally agreed to have been written at some point during the 1650s, although it was only published posthumously in 1681. Marvell is considered to be one of the metaphysical poets who were active during the 17th century. Metaphysical poets were known for their exploration of themes such as love, religion, philosophy and science, which they did with wit and intelligence, using elaborate figurative language. Although it contains a mixture of poetic themes and genres, the poem's overall theme is that of Carpe Diem, or seize the day, i.e. time can be conquered through intense enjoyment. And it shares several language features with another famous poem of the day, To the Virgins to Make Much of Time, otherwise known as Gather Ye Rosebuds While Ye May, written in 1648 by the English poet Robert Herrick, which also exhorts women to make the most of the short time they have when they are young and beautiful, to indulge in the pleasures of the flesh. In the poem, Marvell's fictive speaker addresses his mistress, not meant here in its contemporary sense of a man in an extramarital relationship with another woman, but rather in the sense of, to use Samuel Johnson's definition from his 1755 dictionary, a woman who is beloved and courted. He argues that she should put aside her coyness, or her pretension of shyness, modesty and moral objections, in order to engage in a sexual relationship with him. The poem has 3 stanzas of 20, 12 and 14 lines respectively. It has a bass meter of iambic tetrameter, did-dum, 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 did-dum. It is written in rhyming couplets, e.g., it has an A, B, B, C, C, D, D, etc. rhyme scheme. This very tight rhyme scheme enhances the idea that this is an extensively crafted work over which the speaker has strict control. It has a 3-part structure, each part corresponding to one of its 3 stanzas, in which the speaker uses syllogistic logic to argue away her objections. This particular type of syllogism consists of 2 premises, if, but, and 1 conclusion, then. The conclusion is found to be true if the 2 premises are true. For example, if man could fly, he would be a bird. But man cannot fly, therefore he is not a bird. If we apply this to Marvell's argument, we can see that, on the surface at least, his logic appears to make sense. Had we but world enough and time, if we had the whole world and eternity at our disposal, we could spend thousands of years on our courtship. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. But we don't. We have a short life, and then we die. Now, therefore, let us sport us while we may. So the only thing we can do, logically, is to seize the day and make the most of the time we do have. By using logic, the speaker distances himself from the pressure he is putting on her. He's not being unreasonable. He's being entirely reasonable and logical, and if anyone is to blame, it's time for not allowing them leisure for their courtship, or indeed her for denying logic, and therefore him. Let's be clear about one thing, though. Marvell's logic isn't flawed, and he isn't trying to get anyone into bed. He's deliberately creating a speaker, separate from himself, who is a cunning seducer of women, who is cynically using a superficially logical argument to try to get what he wants. In the first stanza, the speaker begins by constructing an elaborate conceit, in which he makes extravagant references to what he would do to woo his mistress if they had all the space and time in the world. The poem begins with 2 of the most famous lines in English poetry. Had we but world enough and time, this coyness, lady, were no crime. In which the speaker, using a poetic device known as apostrophe, addresses his mistress directly as lady. The phrase, had we but world enough and time, is hypothetical. Had we means if only we had, and introduces the ideas of both space and time which permeate the entire poem. The coyness in the second line refers to her unwillingness to engage in a sexual relationship with him. In these first two lines, Marvell is hinting at a type of logic known as denial of the antecedent, which is a fallacy derived from inferring the inverse from an original statement. This sounds complicated, but it isn't if we look at it in action. It follows the form, if P, then Q. Therefore, if not P, then not Q. If we had all the time and space in the world, P, then your coyness wouldn't be a crime, Q. But as we are going to find out, Marvell's speaker will state quite rightly that we don't have all the time and space in the world, not P. The implication is that, therefore, your coyness is a crime, not Q. This, of course, is never said outright. It is for the speaker's mistress to come to that conclusion herself once presented with all the arguments. What the speaker is doing, however, is presenting her with a false dichotomy, which is a situation in which two alternative points of view are presented as the only options, when others, e.g. marriage, are available. Marvell's use of the conditional mood would, in this stanza, paints a picture of a utopia, or an ideal world, where their courtship would be slow and leisurely. The use of verbs such as sit down, think, walk, and pass, in conjunction with polysyndeton, or the repetition of coordinating conjunctions, and the drawn-out alliteration of the w sounds in we would, which way, and walk, and the liquid l sounds in long love's day, enhance the slowness of the pace. The speaker expands on the themes of space and time as he removes the constraints of both of these to imagine their ideal courtship. By the tide of Humber is a reference to the River Humber and the city of Kingston upon Hull in Yorkshire, where Marvell was born. The idea here is to juxtapose the exotic location of his lover, who is whiling away her time in the pleasant pursuit of collecting the rubies littering the banks of the sacred river Ganges, with the much more mundane setting where the speaker is pining away, thousands of miles distant from her, writing love poetry. The use of the word complain here is an allusion to another genre of poetry known as the complaint, or plaint, which deals with the heartfelt outpourings of an unrequited lover. The sense here is that he would not be discouraged by her coyness, but instead would allow her to allow him to suffer. How noble of him. Do note, though, that Marvell's impeccable iambic tetrameter of the first quatrain breaks down in the second. Thou by the Indian Ganges' side shouldst rubies find, I by the tide of Humber would complain. Not only does he substitute a trochee for the I am in the first foot, putting the stress on the personal pronoun thou, but the first line is also hypercatalectic, in that Marvell has created an extra unstressed syllable with the substitution of an anapaest for the I am in the third foot. In the second line, Marvell once more substitutes a trochee for an I am in order to stress the personal pronoun I. This emphasis on the personal pronouns helps to highlight the pair's separation, and the disruption of the base meter belies the speaker's assurances that he would be happy to suffer, and perhaps hints at his underlying displeasure. He then moves on to describe the length of time of their ideal courtship, using biblical imagery with reference to the flood, which is described in Genesis, and is believed to have occurred over 4,000 years ago, but adds the hyperbolic 10 years before to really overdo it. The length of time that she could continue to refuse him could be till the conversion of the Jews from Judaism to Christianity, which Christians at the time Marvell was writing believed would happen in the end times or at the apocalypse. The leisurely pace of their courtship is once more enhanced by the phonic qualities of the words used, such as the long vowel sounds in combination with the sibilant consonants of years, please, refuse, conversion, and Jews. Marvell then brings the images of space and time together in an ambiguous image that has caused scholars much fierce debate. What does vegetable love mean? And do we really want to know? There are various interpretations. Marvell could mean vegetable love in the sense of not animal, and could therefore be referring to love that is romantic rather than sexual, that needs nurturing over time to grow and mature to a size that is vaster than empires. Or it could just be a cheeky double entendre, referring to male genitalia and sexual arousal. In my opinion, based upon the imagery that is to follow, and the probable tongue-in-cheek nature of the poem as a whole, it's probably both. In this next section of the poem, Marvell's speaker goes on a charm offensive using blazon, which is a literary technique where individual parts of a woman's body are singled out and praised using metaphor. Shakespeare famously uses this technique and turns it on its head in his sonnet, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun." Here Marvell uses it in combination with another poetic device where both the power and intensity of love are expressed through number, as he hyperbolically enumerates the number of years he would spend worshipping each part of her. The flattery builds as these impossible numbers increase. 100 years for her eyes and forehead, 200 for each breast, and 30,000 to the rest. This culminates in his closing couplet where he insists that this is nothing less than she deserves, nothing less than he would want either in an ideal world. Stanza 2 has considerably fewer lines than stanza 1. It is short, sharp, and to the point, presumably to emphasise the harshness of the reality, as opposed to the lyrical beauty of the ideal, which abruptly vanishes with the metaphorical click of the poet's fingers. The tone, introduced with the word but, transitions suddenly from playfulness to one of sombreness, and paints a stark view of the future. The imagery of time and space remain, but have altered and combined. Rather than having all the time in the world, a personified time in his winged chariot is hurrying near. In other words, time is hot on their heels and they are hounded by their own mortality, while the vast geographical stretch between the mundane Humber and the exotic Ganges is replaced with the starkly contrasting deserts of vast eternity. There is eternity in infinite space, yes, but it is after death, and there are no rubies here. Marvell now introduces the theme of memento mori, or remember that you must die. We have now moved from the conditional mood to the future tense, giving the speaker's words a sense of certainty. He reminds her that her beauty is only temporary, and that she is destined to die and become enclosed in a marble vault, where she will be completely alone. Nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. The word echoing has a plaintive tone and evokes the sense of his distance from her, as not even the sounds of his voice dying away remain. The word vault may also be an oblique metaphor for her genitalia, the marble indicating her perceived coldness and frigidity. The images become unpleasant and frightening as he introduces the idea of what actually happens to the body after death. Where his double entendre was cheeky in the first stanza, it is now grotesque. The long preserved virginity that she has pointlessly, in his opinion, saved is to be taken away by phallic worms or maggots, feasting on her decaying flesh, including her sexual organs. Marvell introduces another play on words here with the word quaint, which at the time resembled the archaic word quainter. The word has since changed spelling and pronunciation to become a taboo word for female genitalia. This play on words underlines the way in which she perceives her moral honour to be embodied in her physical honour. Both will turn to dust, and he will fare no better, as his lust will turn into ashes, its fire completely burnt out. Marvell's choice of words here is an allusion to the words of the funeral service in the 16th century Book of Common Prayer. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The implication is that her chastity has, ultimately, proved futile. The tone of the poem changes abruptly again as we move into stanza 3. She has been built up with flattery during stanza 1, and torn down with a stark reminder of her own mortality in stanza 2. She is now in a weakened position where the speaker can deliver the coup de grace, or final blow, and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. The verbs are in the present tense to indicate that we are in the here and now, and indeed the speaker emphasises this and gives the poem a sense of urgency with his repeated use of the word now. He dispels the unpleasantness of what awaits her physical body after death by reminding her of what her body is like now. His imagery is overtly sensual as he evokes the freshness of her young skin with a simile. While the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew. He alludes to her as a sexual being exuding the heat of passion. And while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires. Note that he now constructs her as willing. The euphemistic use of the phrase, let us sport us while we may, to allude to the sexual act is once more playful and full of energy, echoing Robert Herrick's gather ye rosebuds while ye may. The simile, like amorous birds of prey, also communicates vigour and the idea of being the hunter rather than the hunted, suggested by the image of time at the beginning of the second stanza, at my back hurrying near. This image is further developed with Marvell's reference to the concept of tempus edax rerum, or time the devourer of things. But he intimates that they can, by taking the initiative, turn the tables by doing the devouring of each other, and therefore of time themselves. Once more he refers to waiting, but gone is the positive association of stanza 1. It is now languishing, as time is wasted and the body loses vitality, while time devours them slowly in its jaws or chaps. As an antidote to languishing, the speaker's languish now contains verbs conveying a sense of movement, such as roll, tear, and run. Once more, he alludes to sexual union with the euphemism, let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball, which can also be extended to include a possible reference to the result of sexual union, i.e. a child. The metaphor, and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life, is ambiguous. There is certainly a sense of freedom and escape in this image, perhaps alluding to the social and moral boundaries that either keep us imprisoned within them, or, conversely, locked out from the pleasures that life can afford us. It could also be a metaphor for her virginity, and a possible reference to the pain of labour and childbirth, which is, on another level, a means of defying death through reproduction. His concluding couplet indicates that even though they cannot stop time, we cannot make our sun stand still. They can give it a good run for its money by making it chase them. Yet we will make him run. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques, and English literature texts.